What got you there? What got you? What got you there with DeLaney? 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 What got you there with DeLaney?
Daniel Gross is the founder of Pioneer. Previously, he was a partner at Y-Combinator and started its AI program. Daniel has been an angel investor in companies like Cruise, Coinbase, Gusto, Opendoor, Atrium, Figma, and others. If that wasn't enough, he also co-founded Q, a search engine that was acquired by Apple in 2013. Daniel stayed on as director there for several years, responsible for various AI projects across the company. If you want to see how disruptive minds think, then you will love this episode.
Hey guys, I want to tell you about the brand I'm obsessed with right now. And you guys know I'm pretty obsessive about the brands I work with, especially when it comes to athletic apparel. You guys need to check out 10,000. You need to head to 10,000.cc and you guys can enter code WGYT and you're going to receive 20%. Yes, 20% off your entire order. Why do I love 10,000? 10,000 created the only training shorts you'll ever need. They do so by simplifying your options to deliver 3 premium shorts that perfectly cover all the ways you train. They have one built for versatility, another for durability, and one super lightweight, perfect for one of those runs or whatever else you do for fitness. No matter what you do, they have you covered. CrossFit, running, spin, yoga, lifting, or your weekend adventure. It doesn't matter what you do for fitness. They have a short for every way you train. They make it super simple too to find the right short. Just pick the short that's best for you, your lifestyle, personalize it with your individual needs with a custom liner and inseam options, and start getting after it. Not sure if they have the right short? No need to worry, you guys. Make a return or exchange. They offer free shipping, free exchanges, and free returns on every order. Like I said, 10,000 is my favorite brand right now. I am wearing their apparel all the time when I'm working out. I can't recommend them enough. Head to 10,000.cc, enter code WGYT, and you've got 20% off your entire order. You guys know how much I love travel. So I think you're really going to like this next brand. That brand is Globekick. Head to globekick.com, check out what they've got going on, and you can also enter code WGYT to receive 10% off. Globekick makes your travel dreams a reality. They make it easy to discover, plan, and enjoy unforgettable adventures. And you're wondering what some of those adventures are? How about a yoga retreat in Italy? Cage diving with great whites in South Africa? Or their most recent trip was dog sledding and chasing the Northern Lights. Yes, they saw the Northern Lights. I think you guys would love checking them out. So head to globekick.com, enter code WGYT, and you've got 10% off. Daniel, welcome to What Got You There. How you doing today?
Good. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no, you were just finishing up a virtual team meetup. We're going to talk a lot about what you're currently doing, but we've got to start a ways back and a bit in your backstory. And you came here from Israel. You got to lay some groundwork. How did you end up here in the States?
My upbringing was kind of leading me down a path of life very different from the one I'm living now. I'm talking to you here today, staring at sunny San Francisco and Silicon Valley. But I grew up on kind of the hilltops of Jerusalem in Israel as an Orthodox Jew, scheduled to lead a life very different from the one I'm leading now. I think I expected that at this point in life, I'd maybe be in university, married with half a dozen kids or so. Instead I'm out here in Silicon Valley, having started my second company, sold my first to Apple when I was about 23. And all of that kind of giant shift, that giant change, the split screen in the movie really happened as a result of something very unexpected I did when I was 18 years old, which is I applied to this program called Y-Combinator, which is a kind of a startup accelerator program out here in Silicon Valley. And I applied, I vividly remember, from Israel, from kind of a military bunker, tethered my laptop to my old Nokia phone to get some GSM or I forgot what that was called, WAP, pages loaded. And I filled out an application for a company idea that I had. I didn't even realize what I was doing, but when I clicked submit, I really transformed my life. They invited me out here. They gave me a small stipend to effectively live on for 3 months, and they ended up starting a company. which became a search engine, which raised millions of dollars from Sequoia Capital and a bunch of other preeminent venture capital funds, and got acquired by Apple, and it turned into kind of Spotlight Search, which hopefully you enjoy using on your phone and your Mac today. And had a great adventure in life, and having a great adventure so far. Ran a bunch of machine learning projects across hundreds of people at Apple. Became an angel investor in companies like Cruise and Gusto and Coinbase and Atrium and a bunch of others, Opendoor, and served as a partner at Y-Combinator and kind of paid it forward to other people. And in 2018, I decided to start my next company, which is called Pioneer. And in many ways, Pioneer is the culmination of my life to date, in the sense that I am now trying to pay it forward and building a search engine yet again, but this time for kind of promising people around the world, as opposed to kind of files or documents. And what Pioneer tries to do is it tries to find people that have a story kind of similar to mine, but a potential to even be far more successful than me, and uses software to identify these people at kind of a scale that's never been done before. Kind of like Google crawls the internet for pages, we crawl the web for interesting, promising people that have the potential to really build incredible companies, do incredible research, become incredible athletes. All that matters is that they're kind of exceptional in their own domain. And we try to find them automatically in software and fund their work, regardless of what it is. And our belief is that not just that we can kind of find these people and fund them, but that we can kind of even create them. You see, I kind of believe that there's a lot of people that have a story like my own, where without these cheap interventions, get pulled into the paths of conventionalism or kind of the Ivy League, and find themselves leading lives that are far more bland and kind of monotone than they potentially could be. I think the world could stand to have 10 times more Elons that are currently sitting at anywhere from Accenture to Starbucks. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get more people around the world to kind of take the untraditional path, irrespective of where they come from. We launched Pioneer in August, and it's been going surprisingly well to date. When you start a company, you kind of brace yourself and jump off a cliff and pretty much envision that you're going to crash into the ground. That hasn't quite happened yet. We funded to date the software has really funded 30 people around the world, predominantly outside of the US, actually about 55-60% outside of the US. And we've had applicants from over 100 countries like Tanzania, Albania, Morocco, the Netherlands, and even our applicants from the US hail from small towns and cities. And so it very much kind of reminds one of the fact that talent is actually pretty much globally distributed. Opportunity definitely is not. And we view ourselves as a potential way to kind of right the boat here, because just like Google gave the breadth of the world's knowledge to everyone in the world, YouTube gave kind of video content to everyone in the world equally. We plan to give opportunity to everyone in the world to really unleash what was previously locked within the confines of the Ivy League, the kind of elite brand, the community, and the network, to hundreds of thousands of people around the world that have the brilliance of Einstein or have the creativity of Escher, if just given a little bit of opportunity. And so that's Pioneer. That's how it's been going. And out of these 30 people or so, they're pretty exciting. I mean, we have an 18-year-old curing sepsis, which is the leading cause of death in U.S. hospitals. A 23-year-old in Ghana building a competitor to kind of Thumbtack. People working on fundamental machine learning in Australia. People working on self-driving cars in India. So it really spans the gamut, and it feels like we're well on our way to kind of settling this internet Ivy League campus of ours.
Yeah, no, I'm so intrigued by what you guys have been able to build there at Pioneer, and it's so great to hear about the success stories already occurring in such a short time. But I want to know what sparked the idea for Pioneer.
I guess I've been thinking about this for as long as I can remember, and I think it's mostly out of internal angst, because my story shouldn't have happened, and I'm not even that successful. But it shouldn't have happened in the sense that it should not be the case that interventions as simple as the one I did, literally filling out an application, can have such drastic impact on my life. And it certainly should not be the case that so much luck should be involved in success. Because, you come out here and to say Silicon Valley, and there's a lot of happenstance that leads to situations that cause kind of great things for the world. You bump into a person you end up hiring, you serendipitously meet an investor at a coffee shop. And I'm worried about the fact that not enough people are working on removing luck from the genius or success equation. And that's been chewing on me for forever, because I think I was a benefactor of luck. But, luck is very inefficient, right? There's a lot of white noise involved in success. And, over time, as I thought about what I wanted to do with my life, it crystallized to me that while the conventional thing would have been to work on any of the acute problems the world has, say curing cancer, global warming, inequality, the real problem the world has is a lack of people working on those problems. So to me, it's far more exciting to magnify the number of people that are going to work on, say, building new cities or space or, curing cancer than to work on the individual issue myself, because I think that's far more leveraged. And so, the spark was more of an emotional one than a practical one, but that is often the case with ideas.
You mentioned how luck factors into things, and I'm interested, when you came to pitch Y-Combinator, they actually didn't like your idea, correct?
Yeah, that's very true. I sat in the interview and actually left the interview and started walking down the street, and Paul Graham, the founder, chased after me and asked me if I would come back and re-interview, or not even re-interview, but asked me if I would come back and spend the length of the 3-month program working on something else. They didn't like the idea, but they thought I was good.
So what did you do in that interview that jumped out to them?
They would later tell me that the real test wasn't necessarily the interview, but my response to the question that they posited. And it turned out I have no memory of this. I blanked it all out, but it turned out that when they asked me if I wanted to forego my idea and attempt to come out and work on something totally different, there was a little bit of a pregnant pause, which is what they were looking for. Because I was probably thinking to myself, on the one hand, I really like what I'm doing. I believe in it. On the other hand, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. And I think it's that kind of flexible mindset that isn't too flexible. Someone who doesn't jump at every opportunity, nor someone who's too rigid, is what they were looking for.
It's so interesting to hear that. And I'm thinking about context in my own life where I've had a little bit of that pause and really thinking on different things. I'm also interested in your time at Apple. You mentioned some of the things that you and your team helped create at the time, but what did you really walk away from Apple learning? I don't know, is there a system they run there that just has helped you so much throughout the years?
Yeah, I mean, probably an infinite amount of those, actually. And it's very hard, I think, going through these experiences where you spend time, within a group, within a tribe, be it working at a company or spending time at university or going through an incubator or even being part of an internet community. It's really hard to reverse engineer all the particular details you learn from it, because a lot of it is kind of by osmosis, by the peers that you're surrounded by. And indeed, this is kind of what we're trying to imbibe in software and Pioneer. We're trying to make like an online scene or a city almost of people that are really productive to create more productive people. And Apple is kind of it's a physical place, a campus, where that kind of tribe rewards very much very, very serious emphasis on kind of design, product principles, building something that humans enjoy, as opposed to just following the drip feed of capitalism into what will generate more revenue. And it's really just being surrounded by so many great people, Tim Cook, Craig Federighi, Eddie Q, Johnny, and interacting with them that really reshapes your brain. So it's hard to kind of codify particular things, but to me, the kind of meta lesson that was the most interesting thing was how much my own brain psychology changed as a byproduct of exposure therapy almost. I care much more about now the kind of, I grew up an Apple fanboy, admittedly, but I care 10 times more now about kind of the fine details and things, about the thought process and the craftsmanship that goes into something being made. Whereas previously it was far more utilitarian. It also taught me a lot about management and growth at scale. Our startup did well, but it certainly didn't serve 1 billion users. There weren't hundreds of people working on projects that I was responsible for. And Apple had that opportunity and taught me there's a lot of personal growth involved in that. When you shove a 23-year-old to manage a project that will touch 1 billion people, there's a lot of sink or swim. And I'm incredibly thankful to the company for giving me the opportunity to work hard. I mean, I didn't kind of rest and vest. I was there on weekends occasionally, but to really educate myself on what it takes to make something successful at scale, like the iPhone or the Mac or the watch.
When you first came to the States when you were 18, what was your plan? Did you think you'd be here until where we're at right now talking?
No, I thought I would leave after 3 months.
Did you really? You truly believe that? Huh.
100%. I did the math on how much money Y-Combinator then gave out $20,000, which was in the Bay Area for 1 to 2 people, enough to be here for maybe 4 months or so. I had to pay for the ticket from Israel as well. So I didn't have too much cash. And I thought I would leave after 3 months and my company would fail. And I think that's the thing. Is people get stuck in these frameworks of decade-long, arcs of where are they going to be in 10 years and 5 years. And one of the worst things I feel like adults can ask kids is, have you figured out what you want to do in life? No one knows the answer to that question. And the right framework for me is what I try to preach to others is opportunism. Not too much opportunism. I do believe there's commitment to things through good and bad times that is important. I stayed at Apple for 4 years. I didn't have to. I did it out of a sense of obligation and duty. But opportunism in the sense that when you are at these decision moments and junctures, you should be very open-minded about what to do and not be totally prescriptive. Something may take you down a 2-month path. Something may take you down a 10-year path. It's impossible to find out. In general, and this is something I learned from Lloyd Blankfein of Goldman. It is far better to have a fast reaction time to the present than to try to predict the future. And that's kind of become my framework for life and success.
That's a great framework. So you mentioned Lloyd from Goldman mentioned that. I'm interested in how you assess talent. So you end up becoming a partner at Y-Combinator. I mean, you see thousands of entrepreneurs and pitches. What are you looking for in the next great company?
Well, so one curious thing to note, by the way, before we dive in, is Pioneer looks for exceptional people, not necessarily just companies. We'll gladly fund Elon to do his research before he starts Zip2 or SpaceX. We'll gladly fund someone who just becomes Einstein and is a full-time researcher. Because what we believe is we can basically look for the same things. At a high level, we look for people that are incredibly productive in whatever domain they're working on. And Pioneer is effectively a website, a product that tries to measure productivity in different domains. We also look for particular personality traits that we think correlate with productivity. And that's usually someone who's pretty conscientious, smart enough. We don't think we're just looking for the super geniuses. In fact, we're probably not looking for the hyper geniuses. But you have to obviously, be able to go through life and make a certain semblance of decisions correctly. And then we're also looking for people that are kind of outsiders, not necessarily agreeable with the environment around them. People that feel a little bit like they've kind of saturated the world around them and they don't quite fit in. We're not the best place for conventional people. In fact, we're probably one of the worst places for it. I think conventional people are already at Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, Northwestern, all these institutions. We're kind of an outlet for people that are a little bit from the fringe, but still ferociously kind of productive and have an energy about them that's kind of interesting. And I would say those are kind of the traits that we look for. And the thing about us that's really unique is we take bets on people, even though technically they don't deserve it, because we think the largest gift that we can give them is actually a brand and a community and a network that no one else will. And we've seen people, a lot of our pioneers then use the brand that we give them, the pioneer brand, to go on and do things like raise more money for their company or get more grants for their research. And that is, I think, the real gift that we're giving people.
Yeah, no, thank you for answering the question I intended to ask. I was much more interested in how you evaluate individual people. So that was a great answer there. I really appreciate that. So what does it look like when you bring someone into the pioneer, basically, environment and you fund them? What are next steps for them?
Great question. So Pioneer is basically a 30-day online game that you can sign up for. And over the course of 30 days, you just try to get as many points as possible. And if you win our kind of leaderboard of points, you get funding. You get $7,000 in cash and Stellar. You get $100,000 in Google Cloud credits. You get flown out to Silicon Valley. You get put together with other pioneers and so forth. And it resets every 30 days. So even if you don't win, you can play again. And once you become a pioneer, in addition to some of the benefits I described, you really, I think, get what I think are kind of the major benefits of the Ivy League, which are the community and kind of the brand and network. You get put together with other folks that are like you, both in the real world and in the digital world, and you have a network of people that are also working on formidable things, that are building companies that stand to change the world. And in many ways, there's kind of an infinite gamesmanship that goes amongst these people where they'll help you. Right now, there's actually, as we speak, as we record this podcast, there's a kind of a virtual meetup of pioneers going on where they're all talking about kind of problems that they have and helping each other. And I think if you are somewhere in some corner of the world and you're working on a project and you feel alone, that is the number one thing you need. You need people that are both your peers and also people that can pull you up, that are slightly better than you, that can teach you. Finally, we also have a large mentorship component where we'll kind of pair you together with a bunch of mentors and experts who have already built really established things. People like Stephen Wolfram or Tyler Cohen or Dylan Field, the founder of Figma, or Patrick Collison, Mark Andreessen are all kind of experts and mentors on our site. And we route them to the best pioneers based on a bunch of different characteristics. So we're really trying to build a kind of package that could kickstart, the next great person without really caring about their credentials or who they are, or how old they are, or where they're from. The last fun thing I should mention about Pioneer is it turns out that the tournament itself is part of the benefit. A lot of people who win Pioneer continue to reapply batch after batch, just because there's an element of accountability in trying to win something over and over. And it turns out you kind of want that for the same reason you want to kind of be on a campus surrounded by other people that are also working, very aggressively on a particular project.
Yeah, you mentioned the gamification element of this, and I want to know how you view gamification as a productivity mechanism and how much thought went into that prior to Pioneer.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I find games fascinating. I think they are a very underrated way to get people to do things. You could envision a spectrum, and on one end of the spectrum, you have things like drugs. Caffeine is a good example, which gets people over the hump. All these pre-workout drinks athletes will take, before some type of performance, and that kind of reduces the amount of willpower they have to spend in order to accomplish a goal. And at the other end, you have, traditional software that doesn't really, work with you to accomplish your goal. It doesn't reduce the willpower, but it enables you. Like, for example, email or coding. And in the middle, you have games. Games, I find, have some of the potency of, say, caffeine, in the sense that they can kind of put you in a zone where you're in flow, and you're able to do things you wouldn't be otherwise. And in fact, the greatest example of this are video games, where the only purpose is flow. The only goal of a Nintendo game is to put you in a place where you don't have to think and you can just do. And we were trying to marry that with productivity. And we're trying to use some of the mechanics of games, things like point systems, leaderboards, quests, and side quests, in order to reduce the amount of willpower people have to spend to get things done. And I think all productivity software should have this. Like, I think, email should feel rewarding, not burdensome to do, and it should direct you towards the right things to work on, as opposed to, the things that give you a quick dopamine hit. But it doesn't today for a bunch of weird incentive structure misalignment. And that's something we do quite differently. And so Pioneer itself is really structured like an online game for productivity. And I think as a result, it gets people to do things they wouldn't have otherwise, and they keep on coming back for that same reason.
Yeah, when you mentioned productivity and getting into a flow state, and we've had on Stephen Kotler, who really dove deep into flow, and Nihai Csikszentmihalyi has written a great book on it. You guys can check that one out as well. Of course. But how do you get into flow?
I think about that a lot. I think about a lot about the times where I need to get something done and I'm not in flow. I think those are very interesting brainstorms to have with yourself. It's going to happen to you, say at 4:00, there's going to be the thing you need to do. And sometimes you can just step in. And sometimes you can't. And for me, there's two ways to slice it. There's the mental element and the physical element. The physical one is a little bit easier to dissect quickly. So we'll just knock that one out. You got to be careful with what you feed your body, because that can impair you or help you succeed. Just like training, if you're an athlete or an amateur athlete, it is certainly possible to win the marathon and eat terribly. It is easier if you eat properly, and so good nutrition just makes everything easier. And so I spent the follow-up question to a lot of these people are to that point is, what are the details of it? But I think that's highly individualized, sadly. I wish there were global learnings you could apply to everyone. I think there are very few. Maybe, I don't even want to say sugar is bad. For some people, sugar helps them push through, moments of difficulty. Certainly eating food, drinking water is necessary. Beyond that, I think the feedback is just experiment with nutrition and just remember and record and think about what makes you feel sluggish, what makes you feel good. That is one preventer of flow. The other is psychological. When I lack flow, even if kind of the body is in a good place, it is usually because there's either I do not understand the novelty in what I'm about to do. I think fundamentally the brain is addicted to novelty. We want to be engaged and interested. That's probably why we're here as a species, is we followed things that were interesting and we constantly tried to learn. Everyone is trying to learn all the time. Why is refreshing Twitter and your inbox exciting? It's because there's stuff you haven't read yet that you could potentially read. And you have a predictive model that says, well, the stuff I previously read from this place is interesting. My previous email, most of it's boring, but occasionally there's one really interesting one. Boy, I should continue to refresh it. Maybe I'll get an interesting one. And so it's that predictive model that's now telling your brain there's nothing to see here. And so you got to figure out how to make whatever is in front of you interesting and engaging. Sometimes it's about reframing the task in your head. Sometimes it's about reminding yourself why you're trying to do that thing. Sometimes it's about reminding yourself who you're doing it for. It really depends on your psychology. I'm a conscientious person that has a strong sense of accountability. So for me, it's very helpful to remember who I owe this to. I like having people that are kind of dependent on me. It propels me to do work. And so Like food, a lot of this is somewhat individualized, but I would really think about what's preventing you from finding novelty in that particular task, because that's why you're not finding flow. And ultimately, games, again, are this environment that are designed to never have that moment. And Nintendo has people that have spent their entire life just constantly adjusting the grade of the hill so that you never feel it. Never too easy, never too difficult. And so that's how I think about it. I think a lot of this comes from just introspection and reverse engineering.
With introspection, I'm thinking about this in two ways, both giving yourself the time to really sit there and deeply think, and then also how are you getting into those elements where you're not overworking yourself so you actually have that time to think freely?
I mean, I don't know. I feel like I have a lot of time to think. My mind is very active. I don't think, I don't find myself with, I guess I should reframe your question. It's not about finding time to think. It's about figuring out how to make yourself interested enough in getting better such that you find time to think. Time is a thing that is made, depending on what you're interested in doing. And I think there's a lot of people that live life and just have it stream by them and don't realize that they can actively change it. You can really change your experience to things. Life can be significantly better than it is. You can reduce the suffering that you have, no matter what that suffering is, or you can increase it. And I'm blessed to actually lead a life with very little suffering. I thankfully have, knock on wood, I don't have many material problems. I'm in good health. I hope I have people that love me. I have people that I love. I find joy in my work. But that requires a lot of luck, which hopefully, my work is about removing, but it also requires some work, some effort. And that's taught me that is a very important thing to do. There's all this research about internal locus of control and external locus of control and people's orientation towards this framework, whether they believe they can change their environment or not. And one could subscribe to the hypothesis that it's innate. There's a gene somehow that modulates it. I don't believe that. I'm sure there's a gene that makes it easier or harder for you to have this framework, but I'm sure everyone can adopt this mindset that they can mold and change their life. And if you do, then you'll find yourself thinking about how to do it. There's no hack here.
Yeah. Thinking about molding and changing different things. I mean, do you structure your day a particular way to work best?
Yeah. And again, I think a lot of this stuff is individualized. For me, what tends to work really well is to do the most demanding intellectual work in the morning, and to kind of ease off towards later in the day. 3, maybe slightly longer, 8 or 9 years ago, before I was managing people, I was very different. When I was just writing software all day, I needed a long time to boot up, and then I was far more productive late at night. And so the lesson here isn't one is better than the other. It's just to adjust your schedule in accordance. And that's something I spend a lot of time on. So the hours of the morning for me are quite precious. And I think, the thing people forget is regardless of what you do, I mean, even if you're working at a company, that's very large, you need to take care of yourself. The company is a place for you to do work. And then you need to spend time figuring out how to improve yourself. It's just a thing to do. It's not a giant, the solutions here aren't reading, in my opinion, lots of self-help books or, creating checklists or I don't know much. There's not too much process involved. It's just something you have to orient your mindset around to. And for me, that's just something I constantly think about. I constantly think about what went well today, what didn't go well today, what could be improved, what should I try differently. It's just the chatter that's inside my head.
You mentioned how you've shifted now and you're much more of a manager and leader. And I want to know what you found recently that helps you inspire those around you so you can be a better leader.
Well, I think one thing that really helps a lot of the leaders and other founders that I work with and pioneers that I work with is becoming aware of your own insecurities. It just makes life much easier. If you can figure out that, when you're in that meeting and, say someone who technically, works for you says something that causes you to be incredibly defensive. It's incredibly helpful to experience that in the third person as opposed to the first person. The sensation of feeling defensive, and you can occasionally really feel your almost muscles tighten up, as opposed to just being glued to the screen that is the reality and not being able to step outside of the frame. Because that enables you to win in all environments, which is what you want. You want to be able to always be an inspiring, promising leader, even when things are going badly. And so becoming aware of your own insecurities, and for everyone it's something else, is I think incredibly important. Everyone's going to have their own journey to doing this. For me, it was a lot of trial and error. And it was just a lot of, honestly, I don't envy the people that initially reported to me when I was 18 or 19. I had no clue what I was doing, and I'm thankful for them for putting up with me. The second thing I would say that's a good trait of leadership is really good, crisp communication. In particular, getting to the point, answering questions succinctly. And that's something one can get better at by obviously trial and error, but also by two other methods. One is just osmosis, being surrounded by other good leaders. If you can't find good leaders to be surrounded by, I suggest, because you're physically just not in a place where that's happening, I suggest online communities. If you can't do that, I suggest books, just reading a lot. I read a lot, biographies in particular, about great leaders of our time. I find that really helps me kind of imbibe a little bit of their personality. The Churchill biography that came out last year, as an example, is wonderful. All the Chernow books are great. The one about Rockefeller is particularly good. The Isaacson book about actually all the Isaacson books except the Steve Jobs one, sadly, I think are very strong. The Steve Jobs book I just found quite boring. I wonder if it was rushed. And then the third thing that one could do, I think, to improve their communication style is just write a lot. Writing is a feedback loop for speaking in many ways, because you end up reading what you just wrote. And as I would just try writing, don't worry about it getting published or not. Just write. Don't judge yourself too harshly. Things just kind of improve over time. And I would say the third trait, going up to the parenthetical there, the third trait of good leadership, in addition to being aware of insecurities and good communication, the third trait of good leadership, or a third trait amongst many, is just pattern matching. And it's different from intellect. It is true that the great leaders that you meet are generally very smart, usually have very good memory, I found, is a common thing. I don't know that I have super great memory. I certainly worked with leaders that have memory that is 10 times better than my own, which is quite upsetting at times. But it's really pattern matching. It's the fact that you've seen similar things in the past to what you're seeing now, which enables you to come to a very quick decision. So a lot of people will talk about other traits, like, for example, good leaders are decisive, or good leaders make good decisions. But I think a lot of that is just you have a bank of similar things you've seen in the past. And the answer, the way to get that is just by exposure therapy, is to just get in the game of making a lot of decisions and being surrounding yourself in environments where decisions are getting made.
You mentioned some great biographies, many of which came up on the podcast before. When you're reading, do you take notes? Do you do anything like that?
Yeah, my framework for this is I will do anything to read. Like, I will take notes on the book. I will take notes on an index card. I will not take notes. I will take notes on my phone. Anything, whatever it takes to read as much as possible. This is also my strategy with books. I will read fiction. I will read nonfiction. I will read a book from the end to the beginning. I will read a book from the middle to the end. I will stop reading a book at some point. I mention this because one of the greatest gifts given to me by a friend was the realization that you should just read as much as you want, as much as you can, and you should not be very rigid or religious about it. I used to have a framework of I have to finish every book and I have to read it sequentially. And that's a great recipe to never reading, because then you have dread books and then you just don't read, because you're like, going back to our earlier conversation, there's no novelty in the chapter I'm in. So why pick it up? So why read? And now you're watching Netflix, which isn't productive and helpful. Or, I mean, it could be, but it's not reading. So yeah, I take a lot of notes. I scribble on books. I used to be so worried about that because I was thinking, well, I'm reducing the resale value of the book, all these crazy, I think mostly neurotic Jewish thoughts, and I've just given up. And so, yeah, I definitely take notes sometimes.
You mentioned a lot of great books there. One I think you might be interested in is Origins of Genius by Dean Simonton. It seems like a lot of the similar things that you've hit on and thought about. So that might be one to check out. I'll shoot you a note after.
Please.
But I'm also interested about infinite games and how you shifted to playing those.
Yeah, infinite game. And the concept here, just for listeners, is kind of what you'd envision. The idea of any interaction you have shifting from kind of a finite game where you're very worried about between you and the other person who's going to win to an infinite one where you're much more biased towards collaboration than adversarial competition. And I think the best form of competition is kind of a playful one where you're performing for each other. This exists occasionally in small groups. You see people kind of each try. They're pulling each other up, right? And you can almost envision a leaderboard, kind of like Pioneers, where points are. Everyone's kind of trying to figure out where they rank, and they're trying to stack more points on the board, but in a very infinite way, where they're willing to help each other as well. So it's both collaborative and competitive. And you get infinite games when you feel like there's a couple of factors to this. And there's a book about this topic, but called Finite and Infinite Games. It slices it a little bit differently than how I'll describe it. To me, I think you get infinite games is, one, you have to have a sense of confidence that you can win. And two, you have to have a sense that multiple people can win, because if there's only one person, it becomes zero sum. Or three, you have to believe, you have to be playing a different game. I don't mind helping you win this finite game that I'm not playing. So for example, you see this with siblings a lot, where in good sibling dynamics, it is often the case that they end up doing different things. And one can take pride in being really good at X. I'm a really hard worker, and my sister's really the smart one, and the way that manifests is maybe my sister's a researcher and I'm a lawyer or something like that. I'm not making any judgments on either profession. And so you get a sense that they're playing a different game. I strongly suggest, with your friends, having friends outside of industry is very helpful for this reason. Having friends that say aren't invested in your company is super helpful for this reason. And I mean, you can go against those two rules. And in fact, most of my friends are in the same industry, just as a byproduct of where I live. But, we have a sense that we can collaborate, because winning is multiple people can win. My company can win, their company can win. So I think when you have those three factors, you're able to start playing infinite games, and it's just a much more fun life. And it's actually, even if all you want to do is just win all the time, it's a much better way to win. Because when you have finite game nature, I don't think you optimize properly. And the reality of it is, life is long, multiple people can win. And so more often than not, games you perceive as finite are quite infinite.
How long have you been thinking like that?
Well, I don't know. I can't tell. I mean, I read the book a couple of years ago, so perhaps that crystallized the exact wording, but I've been using games as metaphors my entire life. I think. I think things really took it to another level with Pioneer, because we started building a game. But I kind of viewed everything as a game. I mean, I think in many ways, a cocktail party is a game. A dinner, if you sit down at dinner, it's I kind of think there's this interesting thing that's happening where if you become aware of it, it's very interesting to observe who is, you're kind of building a leaderboard, who's interesting at the table. Where do I rank amongst everyone else? Who feels really kind of self-authored and confident? Who feels like they're just talking to hear themselves heard? And so that is in itself a game where people are kind of jousting for space and trying to figure out where they rank on a list. And I think it's a very common human thing to do. So to me, it's a very natural kind of organic thing. It's hard for me to find the exact origins of it in my mind. But I do think it's a powerful framework for one final reason I should mention, which is it relaxes people a little bit to think of things of games. Because when you say the word game, I think you evoke whatever fun or pleasure is to you. And I'd like us all to have more of that in our lives. And there's no reason why work shouldn't feel like a fun game.
Yeah, no, thank you for expanding upon that. I love hearing your framework and your ideas. So it's just great to hear you cultivate that throughout the years and then really hone in on that. And I want to move now towards your idea generation. And I know you're constantly coming up with ideas. You have some fun ways of thinking about new things. How do you do that on a daily basis?
Oh gosh. Since I can remember, I was coming up with ideas. I've had lists and lists and lists of ideas I've maintained over decades, literally decades. I mean, I think my mindset is one where I have ideas. Now, I don't think this is just a blessing. There's a curse to it as well, which is I have to make sure I stay focused. You don't win in life if you work on 19 things at the same time. And so for me, a huge outlet is writing stuff down. And I have this giant, at this point, it's a Google Doc, just list of ideas of companies, research projects, books that should be published. And I expand, over time on it. I don't know how that got started. It's just kind of part of my brain software. And it doesn't seem to be going away. But I think that, and a lot of people will email me or call me or ask me how should I have my startup idea? I think the thing to realize about startup ideas is they don't, there's something meditative about it in the sense that you can't, I don't know if you put me in a room and you ask me to think of ideas that I'll think of anything good. And they kind of have to organically come to you. I think the best thing you can properly think of if you really want to work it like a muscle are problems that you have in your life. I think that's the right way to orient yourself. What should be improved, and just think from first principles. It's lame that you have to wait for elevators. Someone should fix that. Elevators should be kind of more efficient in their delivery. It's lame that, there's like 6 different apps you can use for ride sharing. Someone should fix that. Now, these may not be like great startup or business ideas, but these are problems that exist in the world. Maybe they'll be solved by incumbents, but they're problems. It's lame. I was thinking recently, it's a very dumb idea, but I'm a long distance runner. I love running. There's no place where I could find hotels that are near good running routes. That's what I want. So that should exist. That's a problem I have. So I would just orient yourself to think about the anecdotal problems that you have, and hopefully from that, I think you get startup ideas that are actually quite useful.
When you're looking at one of these problems that you have, what would it take for you to actually cultivate this into a business? Is it something that has to keep you up at night, or is there one factor that would make you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to realize about kind of going from startup ideas to businesses is I guess the mistake people make is they look at, when they think of businesses, what do you think of? You think of General Motors, you think of Google, you think of Apple, Facebook, SpaceX, Stripe, Dropbox. These are giant things. And so you get stuck a little bit because whatever idea you have is probably not going to be a giant thing, especially if it's a good one. Great ideas don't often start out as giant things. And so I think the thing to realize is that all of these large companies actually started as really small projects. And it's really interesting to go look. I would go look at the landing pages of all the large tech companies, 2004 Facebook or 1999 Google, or 2001 Apple, whenever they launched that website. They all look really stupid almost and silly. And if you look at those great photos of Jeff Bezos in his office, starting Amazon with the graffiti on the wall, that is what stuff looks like. So, the thing to realize is the small project idea actually could probably become a giant business. The one twist on this that I recommend people stay focused on is you should have a line of sight to what is a good market. I would not work on an idea that seems small if the market seems obviously bad, where there's no path to differentiation. And this is a little controversial. A lot of people will tell you to ignore the market will change, non-consumption. You got to be careful. I would not start a food delivery app. It's just a bad market to participate in now. You can think creatively about the market. So you can say, well, maybe for whatever reason, Google web search isn't good enough for you and you want to do something different. I mean, maybe there's an interesting path to take down Google. That's a giant market with a large incumbent. But spend a little bit of time just thinking about how potentially you'd make a little bit of money, not a lot, and figure out how much margin there may be. Do not be too afraid if it looks silly and humble, but just make sure that the market you're operating in could be giant, if that makes sense.
No, that certainly does. That's very practical. That's some tremendous advice. I know we have a few short minutes. Can we fly through a few really quick hit questions?
Sure. Sounds great.
Cool. Can you just give a quick sentence on each of these people? Elon Musk.
Brilliant, erratic, Edison of our time.
Steve Jobs.
Neurotic, I think much more of, what would be a good one here? It's much more of kind of the neurotic Escher of our times in terms of his artistic ability being the important one.
Charlie Munger.
Seems like Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett have become the wizened old kind of grandparents of capitalism we all wish would adopt us.
Alexander the Great.
Probably the leader that has led most conquest all time ever.
If you were starting a company tomorrow with one co-founder, who would that be?
Whoa, that's really tough. I have 4 or 5 close friends that I think I would do it with. No, there's no. I'm picking children. If you ask me to find one person.
I got you. Would that be the same if you could take stock in any one person you've come across in your career? Who would it be?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of great options. No one specific person, obviously charts the list. I'm blessed, I guess, is what I'm reflecting on.
Any chance you could throw out a couple there?
I mean, I think there's people that I'm lucky to call friends that are changing the world. On both the co-founder and equity concept. On the co-founder concept, I mean, Robbie Walker, my old co-founder, he's still at Apple. He's a wonderful person. A lot of the people who are advisors for Pioneer are close friends of mine. People like Nat Friedman, the CEO of GitHub, Patrick Collison, the CEO of Stripe, John, the president of Stripe, his brother, Elad Gil, the angel investor, Graham Duncan, out in New York, is a hedge fund manager, is I think a wonderful person. Who else? I think Sam Harris is doing a great service to the world. I think Mark Andreessen remains one of the most generative people I've ever met, as is Balaji. What I feel really blessed about is I'm partially just scrolling my iMessage chat history. I think Michael Nielsen is doing really interesting research in a bunch of good areas. Naval Ravikant's, I think, ideas just around the world are obviously resonating with a lot of people. All of these folks, I think, are really good. I will say, though, all of these people are kind of already at the top of their game. In terms of underrated bets, the answer is assuredly our pioneers. These are people we are literally trying to take stock in. You could you go on our site and kind of view all of them. We all, obviously, I strongly believe those are folks that are going places.
No, I appreciate that. I know that wasn't an easy one to answer. So final question, I know you've got to get going, but what's the best product you use?
Recently, all-time best product I use is still undoubtedly the iPhone. Boring answer, but true. The recent new addition is probably the AirPods. I mean, they just work. They don't seem to need charging. If you want a more novel answer, something I started to use actually on Michael Nielsen's recommendation perhaps a year ago, I use almost every day, is called Anki, A-N-K-I. It's a spaced repetition memorization app. And it is basically a way to never forget anything. Whatever you put in the Anki doesn't come out of your brain. That's it. It's great.
Well, your first two answers were the same for me. I hadn't heard of Anki yet, so definitely going to look that up. But Daniel, this has been a lot of fun. I walked away from this learning a bunch. I know the listeners did as well. Where can they best stay connected with you?
If you want to subscribe to kind of my thoughts, which, are hopefully fractionally interesting, but perhaps Twitter is a good resource. I'm on Daniel Gross on Twitter. My email is also in my Twitter bio. You can email me there. And then, Pioneer is actually a great way if you're interested in kind of further working with me or with other interesting people to, like, for example, pretty much everyone I just mentioned. I think almost all of them are Pioneer advisors or mentors. Play the game and see how far you get. You'll learn a lot.
Well, we're definitely going to have all that linked up in the show notes. But Daniel, I can't thank you enough for joining us on What Got You There.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey guys, I want to tell you about the brand I'm obsessed with right now. And you guys know I'm pretty obsessive about the brands I work with, especially when it comes to athletic apparel. You guys need to check out 10,000. You need to head to 10,000.cc and you guys can enter code WGYT and you're going to receive 20%. Yes, 20% off your entire order. Why do I love 10,000? 10,000 created the only training shorts you'll ever need. They do so by simplifying your options to deliver 3 premium shorts that perfectly cover all the ways you train. They have one built for versatility, another for durability, and one super lightweight, perfect for one of those runs or whatever else you do for fitness. No matter what you do, they have you covered. CrossFit, running, spin, yoga, lifting, or your weekend adventure. It doesn't matter what you do for fitness. They have a short for every way you train. They make it super simple too to find the right short. Just pick the short that's best for you, your lifestyle, personalize it with your individual needs with a custom liner and inseam options, and start getting after it. Not sure if they have the right short? No need to worry, you guys. Make a return or exchange. They offer free shipping, free exchanges, and free returns on every order. Like I said, 10,000 is my favorite brand right now. I am wearing their apparel all the time when I'm working out. I can't recommend them enough. Head to 10,000.cc, enter code WGYT, and you've got 20% off your entire order. You guys know how much I love travel. So I think you're really going to like this next brand. That brand is Globekick. Head to globekick.com, check out what they've got going on, and you can also enter code WGYT to receive 10% off. Globekick makes your travel dreams a reality. They make it easy to discover, plan, and enjoy unforgettable adventures. And you're wondering what some of those adventures are? How about a yoga retreat in Italy? Cage diving with great whites in South Africa? Or their most recent trip was dog sledding and chasing the Northern Lights. Yes, they saw the Northern Lights. I think you guys would love checking them out. So head to globekick.com, enter code WGYT, and you've got 10% off.
What got you there with Sean DeLaney? What got you there with Sean DeLaney? What got you there with Sean DeLaney? What got you there with got you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of What Got You There. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review on iTunes and also share with your friends. Thanks so much. Looking forward to talking with you next time. If you want to stay up to date on all things I'm working on behind the scenes and everything we've got going on at What Got You There, head over to whatgotyouthere.com. You'll also be able to see more on podcast guests and what they're doing. Thanks to Justin Great for providing us the intro and outro song. If you like his music and want to find out more about what he's working on, head over to justingreat.com.